The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
This is not the Onion version of the David Pakman Show. This is a real story. Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump suggested the possibility that gun owners use their guns against Hillary Clinton if she is indeed elected in November. This was at a campaign rally yesterday in Wilmington, North Carolina. You would think it was a fake story. You would say, yeah, the guy mocked a disabled reporter. Yeah, the guy ridiculed the Gold Star family whose son was killed in 2004 fighting for the U.S. military. Yeah, the guy suggests unconstitutional, immoral, and unconscionable ideas all the time. But he wouldn't hint that his supporters could maybe kill his opponent, would he? Yes, he would. Take a look.
Hillary wants to essentially abolish the Second Amendment. By the way, and if she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, that will be a horrible day.
Hey guys, any day now, Trump is going to pivot to a softer, more conciliatory tone just after he ends with the suggestions of killing political opponents. He's really resetting his campaign in an amazing way. Shift away from the Muslim ban towards killing your opponent. Even the Trump supporter on stage, there's a guy who I'll point to if you're watching. This guy right here with the red shirt, this guy right here, he looks stunned when Donald Trump says this. I'm going to just replay a few seconds of the Trump statement zoomed in on this guy. Even a guy picked to be on stage at a Trump rally, and you've got to be out of your mind in favor of Trump to make it onto the stage at a rally. He's shocked. Take a look.
Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But I'll tell you what, that will be a horrible day.
There is one other possibility. By the way, unclear actually whether he's shocked or thrilled and titillated by the suggestion. There's also the possibility that Trump was suggesting not killing Hillary Clinton, but killing the judges that Hillary Clinton would appoint, which, you know, I guess advocating the mass murder as opposed to just a single assassination is a little bit different.
It's not really. No, it's the same. What we're talking about is just killing your political opponents. And yeah, it's not going to change a thing, though, for his staunch supporters.
No, if you're a supporter of Trump, he already said I could shoot people on Fifth Avenue. It wouldn't change anything.
Good,
so
that's true.
If he's suggesting other people shoot someone, why would that change anything? Now, the campaign has said, oh, all he was doing was trying to activate voters to vote in November for whom the Second Amendment is important. No, the entire thing was, if Hillary wins in November, then X, Y, Z will happen. If you're talking about something that will happen if Hillary wins after the election and what people might do, you can't then say what I was actually doing was trying to encourage people to vote. Now, this is a good time for me to introduce or reintroduce the term stochastic terrorism. Now, stochastic is a term that's often used in investing, right? In stocks, it sort of means randomly determined, having a random probability distribution or pattern, which we could analyze statistically, but we couldn't predict precisely. So like, for example, if I said to you, X% of stocks, statistically and probabilistically speaking, over the next 10 years will go up by 2,000%, right? We know that some stocks probably will, but we have really no way of predicting exactly which stocks those are. It applies to what Donald Trump is doing in that the general suggestion of using guns against Hillary Clinton or against her Supreme Court nominees or whoever, statistically speaking, because of the size of Trump's platform, it could well lead to someone being inspired by what he said to actually go and kill a judge or try to kill Hillary Clinton. Hopefully the Secret Service would be able to protect her. But it's completely unpredictable who it would be. But once you get to large enough numbers, these are not words that have no meaning. And that's how the term stochastic terrorism applies here, Lewis.
We know that Trump's rhetoric months ago, the semi-toned down rhetoric back then was enough to lead people to beating up black people at Trump rallies.
Yeah.
So imagine what this type of rhetoric can do.
I wasn't imagining that within 2 weeks, those horrible comments about Gold Star Dad, Khazar Khan, and deceased Army Captain Humayun Khan would seem relatively innocuous, as offensive as they were. But we kind of have to hand it to Trump, Lewis. He's come up with something so much more outrageous that the entire Khan scandal seems relatively tame compared to the implicit suggestion that you kill his opponent.
He steps it up every week. Every week he says something more outrageous than the week before. And I'm wondering where he hits the wall.
Right.
Where does this end?
Are supporters ready to stop saying, well, Trump didn't really mean it? When he says ban Muslims, he's just kind of saying it. It's not really anything that will have an impact. What's Paul Ryan going to say now? While I don't agree with Trump suggesting his supporters assassinate Hillary Clinton, I still support him and our party as the Republican nominee. This is a campaign in chaos. And imagine being Secret Service. You're paid to protect both candidates, and one is making comments that could endanger the other. It is a very, very weird time to be following politics, and we will talk to Bill Scher about it a little bit later. Let's talk about the national debates. There is a very reasonable possibility that Donald Trump will not debate Hillary Clinton, period, this election. There are 3 debates scheduled this fall, one in Hempstead, New York, one in St. Louis, Missouri, and one in Las Vegas. There's also a vice presidential debate scheduled. Here's the format for each of these 3 debates. First of all, we have that first debate at Hofstra University, 6 time segments of 15 minutes each on major topics to be selected by the moderator and announced at least 1 week before. The second presidential debate at Washington University in St. Louis, that one will have a town meeting format. And then the third presidential debate at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, it will be an identical format to the first presidential debate. This is from the Commission on Presidential Debates. Donald Trump is already laying the groundwork for saying he wants to debate, but the entire thing needs to be up to his standards. Here is a quote from a phone call that Donald Trump did with Time magazine, where he said about the debates, "I will absolutely do 3 debates. I want to debate very badly, but I have to see the conditions." Some of those conditions, apparently who the moderators are, Trump going on to say during this Time magazine phone interview, and we will put that up for you. I'll have to see who the moderators are. Yeah, I would say that certain moderators would be unacceptable. Absolutely. I did very well in the debates on the primaries. According to the polls, I won all of them. So I look forward to the debates. But yeah, I want to have fair moderators. I will demand fair moderators. Trump likes to talk about how he negotiated the primary debates, right? The primary debates were run by commercial television channels working together with the Republican National Committee. These national debates are run by the Commission on Presidential Debates. They are not run by TV networks. This is a nonprofit organization, the commission that was created after the '84 election. If he's not going to release his taxes, Lewis, imagine if he doesn't debate.
It would probably help him
if
he didn't debate. Well, yeah, he can. Every time he talks, he loses support.
Well, I think if you believe that the actual act of debating will hurt him, then maybe net not debating would be a positive. I believe if he announces initially he's not going to debate, that is absolutely going to hurt him. The question is, will it end up hurting him less than actually debating if you believe that the debates themselves would be a disaster? It's sort of hard to know. We will never know. He either will debate or he won't, and thus we will only be able to measure the repercussions of the decision he actually makes.
Yeah, and I mean, if he debates, the question is, will his general strategy of just attacking whoever is on stage next to him legitimately or just slinging insults at them, will that actually help him?
Yeah, a lot of questions around these debates, and Trump at least opening the door to not debating at all. Let's talk about a story involving WikiLeaks and Julian Assange. On July 8th, just over a month ago, 27-year-old Democratic staffer Seth Rich was murdered in Washington, D.C. Now, it was initially described as an attempted robbery gone wrong, but some disagree with that because the killer or killers left behind Rich's wallet, his watch, and his phone. And if the goal was to rob him, you would think that after killing him, they would have at least taken his stuff, although maybe not if they left in some kind of panic. Seth Rich's father said to reporters, if it was a robbery, it failed because he still has his watch his money and his credit cards. Julian Assange did an interview yesterday with Swedish television suggesting, implying that Seth Rich was, now I want to be careful here, maybe a WikiLeaks informant or the WikiLeaks informant around the leaked DNC emails, not Russia. I will play the video for you, and people are coming away with basically one impression, which is honestly or dishonestly, because it's true or because of some kind of message that Julian Assange wants to put in the media discussion, he is implying that Seth Rich was WikiLeaks' source on the DNC emails. Take a look.
Donald Trump has had a disastrous few weeks. If you look at the polls, he needs a miracle. In the American political lexicon, there's such a thing as the October surprise. The stuff that you're sitting on, is an October surprise in there? Do you even know what you're sitting on?
WikiLeaks never sits on material. Whistleblowers go to significant efforts to get us material and often very significant risks. There's a 27-year-old works for the DNC who was shot in the back, murdered just 2 weeks ago for unknown reasons as he was walking down the street in Washington. So
that was just a robbery, I believe, wasn't it?
No, there's no finding. So
what are you suggesting? What are you suggesting?
I'm suggesting that our sources take risks, and they become concerned to see things occurring like that.
But was he one of your sources then? I mean,
we don't comment on who our sources are.
But why make the suggestion about a young guy being shot in the streets of Washington?
Because we have to understand how high the stakes are in the United States.
Shortly after this interview, WikiLeaks announced that they were offering a $20,000 reward for information leading to a conviction in the killing of Seth Rich. Now, there is a faction that believes Julian Assange is knowingly or unknowingly, wittingly or unwittingly being manipulated by Russia or maybe even the Trump campaign to hurt Hillary Clinton. Now, one piece of evidence people point to is that Roger Stone, this huge Trump supporter, recently claimed to be in touch with Julian Assange. Just 2 days ago, speaking to the Southwest Broward Republican Organization, Roger Stone said the following. Take a look.
With regard to the October surprise, what would be your forecast on that, given what Julian Assange has intimated he's going to do?
Well, it could be any number of things. I actually have communicated with Assange. I believe the next tranche of his documents pertain to the Clinton Foundation, but there's no telling what the October surprise may be.
Why on earth would Roger Stone be in touch with Julian Assange? But Stone is a known liar, and implying something you know to be false is also a tactic to create drama. The other issue is Julian Assange could be contradicting himself, because he has said many times, Lewis, that the WikiLeaks submission system is by definition anonymous, so that even WikiLeaks themselves often have no way of knowing who sent them information or identifying where leaks came from. I honestly do not know what to think. I am presenting this. At first, it was just conspiracy theories that Seth Rich was killed in some kind of cover-up retribution or proactive killing to prevent him from spilling the beans on something he knew. I didn't find it worthwhile of coverage at that point. Now that Julian Assange is saying this, it changes the dynamic of the story drastically.
I'm kind of thinking that this is not a connection he would draw if he didn't at least believe that there was some connection there.
Even if he doesn't necessarily know.
Right. He doesn't seem like the type of guy to just drop something like that, knowing that it's false, or not having any other information, or just throwing it out there because it's salacious. But I could be wrong.
I really don't know. If he is indeed throwing this out there to create drama, or because it is salacious, or to get attention, which I agree doesn't particularly strike me like Julian Assange's MO, it would be hugely irresponsible and unethical. We will follow this, and we will see where it ultimately goes. Let's take a quick break. Plenty more after this.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Randall McMahon. Randall, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. Quick update. We launched the new website last week. On Monday this week, I announced that we had a coupon code BETA50, BETA50, which gave 25 people the ability to get a 50% off membership for as long as they want. We have 2 of those left. That's it. So if you want one of those half-price memberships, davidpakman.com/membership, pick your plan monthly or yearly, and then use coupon code BETA50, BETA50. You'll save 50%. That's a good deal, Lewis. I mean, if you had saved 50% on your 4 million memberships, think about what that would have done for you.
Yes, I could have retired, but I bought all those memberships. But I'm supporting the show.
Let's go to Hatriot Mail. If you've never seen Hatriot Mail, I'll remind you what it is.
It's like a mandatory transvaginal ultrasound for your mind. Hatriot Mail. Written by patriots who hate David Pakman. Because America. And because freedom.
Today's Hatriot Mail is related to the Donald Trump campaign, but also does something that the Trump campaign often does. I'll explain after we listen to it. Take a look.
David, honestly, it's so blatantly obvious you are so anti-Trump. You don't even attempt to discuss him, his spokesperson, or his campaign without total bias and objectivity. Katrina is one of the more articulate spokespeople on anyone's campaign that I have seen in this election. If he was so bad and she was so bad, then why does he have more votes by the people than any other Republican in history? Perhaps you should pull your head out of your wooden-headed counterpart's ass and nitpick objectively on Hillary's campaign as well. You penny-pinching garage operation douchebag.
This is unbelievable. Is there any way, Lewis, that you can put up just that transcript, just the text, maybe by pausing the video when we're displaying it? Because I just want to point out 2 things here to the audience, which are just amazing. And we know Hatriots are known for just bogus grammar and spelling and the entire thing. But there are 2 really, really funny things here that I want to point to. Number one, they're actually saying we are objective in our discussions of Trump. They are saying you don't even attempt to discuss him without objectivity. That means we are objective in discussing Trump. Clearly, the Hatriot doesn't mean this, but then here's my favorite part. Third to last line. Nitpick. K-N-I-T. Yeah, knitting, like as in the act of knitting a sweater. We are nitpicking objectively, or not nitpicking objectively on Hillary Clinton's campaign. So what's the analogy here? That's good, Lewis. We don't need this anymore. Donald Trump chooses unwinnable battles all the time, going after a Gold Star family, suggesting that the opponent, Hillary Clinton, maybe be shot by supporters of the Second Amendment. Those are really unwinnable battles. Emailing me to defend Katrina Pearson as the one thing you want to contact me about, the same Katrina Pearson who defended a call for a pure breed president, the same Katrina Pearson who says that, so what if we are hurting Muslims by banning them from coming to the U.S.? After all, they're just Muslims. This is picking unwinnable battles. And it's interesting that supporters of Trump seem to be doing the same thing Trump is doing, choosing battles that you cannot possibly win.
Yep, it's a big mistake for Donald Trump. For Hatriots, it's not really a big deal. Pearson, articulate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, more articulate than that Baumgartner.
Healy Baumgartner, yeah. There is one other person that Katrina Pearson is more articulate than, and that is Trump's other spokesperson, Healy Baumgartner. I have to do one more follow-up about the Jill Stein pseudoscience segment because the emails have become totally fallacious in that they are straw-manning our commentary. We did a commentary 2 days ago, okay, about some comments made by Green Party candidate Jill Stein that referenced sort of pseudoscientific ideas and they lack depth. I'm not going to redo the segment today because we just did it 2 days ago, but in the description to this video on YouTube, we will link to the original video. And we talked about Jill Stein referencing debunked vaccine myths, but I made it clear Jill Stein has praised vaccines and their positive role in human history. We didn't say she is an anti-vaxxer at all, Lewis. Let's make that clear.
Yes, that's true. Right.
Yesterday, I received maybe 100 emails from people pointing me to a recent interview that the Young Turks did with Jill Stein, where they, quote, ask her about vaccines, and it, quote, proves I lied, and why won't I apologize? So I checked out the video, and it refutes nothing that we said. It does talk about vaccines. Now, for those who don't know, there's a logical fallacy called the straw man, and I'll put that up for you on the screen. The straw man fallacy is misrepresenting someone else's position in order to make it easier to criticize. So the formal example would be person X takes position A or makes argument A. Person Y attacks position B, which is a distorted version of position A, and then uses the fact that they've rebutted position B to suggest that person X is wrong about the first position they took. Sounds crazy, right? Doesn't really make sense. Let me play the video from TYT, and then I'll explain to you how it applies to this scenario.
Plain and simple, yes or no. Do you think vaccines cause autism?
No.
Great. Cleared up. She.
And I say, read my book, okay? I'm on the record on this in the first review of the literature that Physicians for Social Responsibility and I co-authored a book on this. We were very clear when we reviewed the science, looking at what may be some of the public health drivers here. Autism did, vaccines didn't even make it into the list of things that we considered reviewing.
Great. So Jill Stein says very clearly she doesn't think vaccines cause autism. Case closed, right? Well, we never claimed she thinks vaccines cause autism. What I did say is that Jill Stein's references to debunked claims about vaccines, combined with her less than articulate comments about both wireless/Wi-Fi and GMO, taken together, present a pattern that lends itself to pseudoscience. Again, here is Jill Stein's quote that I used on Monday, where she says, as a medical doctor, there was a time when I looked closely at those issues, and not all those issues were completely resolved. There were concerns among physicians about what the vaccination schedule meant, the toxic substances like mercury, which used to be rampant in vaccines. There were real questions that needed to be addressed. I think some of them at least have been addressed. I don't know if all of them have been addressed. So super clearly, she is saying that she is a medical doctor and that she doesn't know if some of these concerns have been addressed. These concerns have been addressed. The entire thing around the dosing and scheduling of vaccines has been addressed as not being damaging to the health of children. The entire thing around so-called mercury in vaccines has been addressed. So it's very frustrating, Lewis, and we'll put up now the actual version of the straw man fallacy that was applied by many in our audience here. I said Jill Stein's references to debunked vaccine claims in the context of other assertions are a pattern of pseudoscience. Angry audience members wrote to me saying, David, Jill Stein doesn't think vaccines cause autism and she's not anti-vaccine. And their conclusion was that I lied about Jill Stein. I really am disappointed, Lewis, because if we are going to have a real discussion about these issues, we can't start by having me defend positions I never took. It sort of counters the entire point of this program, doesn't it?
It does. I know that there are many people out there as well that will either start watching part of a video or even just look at a headline and think that they understand everything that's happening. And
right. Vaccines was in the title, so I
right.
must be saying she thinks vaccines cause autism without actually looking at the video.
You can tell all the time looking at YouTube comments that people did not watch the whole video and may have just looked at the headline. And this is a huge problem. And if you are upset at something we start saying during a clip, just watch the whole thing, try and stay calm, and analyze it in detail.
Based on what we actually said, rather than some position we never even took. Hopefully this is the last follow-up we have to do on this. Hey, I do want to mention that there is an independent Republican candidate named Evan McMullin, who is a former CIA official, opposes Donald Trump, and is running for president. Recently worked on policy developments with the House Republican Conference. Yes, he has already missed the ballot access deadlines in dozens of states, but he is a Mormon and he could actually make an impact in Utah. And we've already talked about Utah being one of Libertarian Gary Johnson's strongest states. Currently, it's Trump 37, Clinton 25, Johnson 16 in Utah. this is the best state that Gary Johnson has in terms of his Libertarian Party candidacy. If we add McMullen to the Utah ballot, it could take some from Trump, it could take some from Johnson, and importantly, 14% of Utah voters are currently saying other. They've not yet picked a candidate. If a lot of those individuals, Utah, of course, the most Mormon state in the country, could have a strong rallying effect behind the Mormon candidate McMullen, that could actually give Utah to Hillary Clinton. And when you think about it, the Gary Johnson support in Utah by Mormons doesn't make that much sense. Gary Johnson is pro-choice. And a lot of the people, Republicans in Utah that are supporting Johnson are doing it because of their strong dislike of Trump. But given the option of an anti-abortion candidate like McMullen, they could very quickly move away from Gary Johnson. And, we know that mathematically Utah by itself is very unlikely to swing this election. But Trump advisors have been very clear that Trump needs, at minimum, all the states Romney won. And that, of course, wouldn't get him a victory. And then he needs to pick up something else. If he loses any Romney states, it is very unlikely that he's going to have a good November 8th.
Yeah, this is makes Utah a bit more interesting than usual to look at.
Right.
And do you like this guy in general? I mean, of course, you'd pick him over Trump. But.
Yeah, not really. I mean, he's just some guy. I don't think he's particularly qualified. I think that this is sort of a last-ditch effort. And as I mentioned, he can't even get on the ballot in many, many states. It's mostly a non-starter, but it would be sort of poetic in some way if he ends up taking what is often one of the most red voting states and actually helping Hillary Clinton win that state. It would be incredible.
Yeah, and it would be basically the Nader effect, just on one state. I'm sure the Hillary campaign is thrilled about this.
My prediction is we're not going to talk very much more about Mr. McMullen, but at least we've gotten it on the record, Louis, that he does exist, and in Utah, he might be able to make a difference. If he makes more news, we will absolutely tell you.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
It's great to welcome back to the show today Bill Scher, senior writer at Campaign for America's Future, contributing editor at Politico. Bill, last time you were on, I believe it was, a month and a half or 2 months ago, I suggested that I was finding this election to be the most unusual and compelling in a very, very long time. And at the time you said, well, I'm still finding 2008 more compelling. Are you now ready to say that this has gone above and beyond and has become a very, very bizarre and unusual election?
Well, this is the bigger train wreck, of course, but and I mean, Donald Trump has an obsession with being in the news, regardless of whether it makes sense politically or not. So it always makes it more entertaining and shocking. But we may be coming up to a point where the outcome is known, and we're going to be lacking a lot of drama for the fall campaign, which we're not accustomed to. We're in the last couple of times, even when Obama was ahead of McCain by a decent amount, there was this lingering fear that there was a secret white vote that would materialize that would not accept an African-American president. That proved not to be true. Whereas now, if the polls are 6 to 10 points for Clinton nationally, there's no secret vote that's going to overcome that on election day.
Yeah, there's been a lot of reaction to when I just, I don't do polling. I know that might not be a surprise to you, but seemingly our audience thinks that when I talk about a poll, I've in some way done the poll and am presenting the numbers I want. I've been just reporting that, 16 of the last 16 national polls have Hillary Clinton ahead, et cetera, et cetera. And some of the reaction is that for some reason, the polls right now cannot be trusted, either due to oversampling of Democrats, which has been sort of explained by 538 pretty precisely as to why that's not a fair critique of many of these polls, or because they're not yet considering something, as you're talking about, some X factor that is not yet built in there. Historically speaking, mid-August, do polls start to paint a relatively precise picture of where the race really is? More people are interested. A higher share of those who will vote are now paying attention.
Mid-August is maybe a touch early to draw too precise a conclusion. Now, we're past both conventions. There are some years where the conventions happen later than mid-August, or they're happening around mid-August. I just did a piece for Real Clear Politics talking about Trump's theoretical ceiling. You go back 12 months with Donald Trump, and he has been between 38 and 44% in the Real Clear Politics average. And that's different than the Republican primary, where people talked about a Trump ceiling very arbitrarily, and they weren't paying attention to the fact that in the average, his number was going up the whole time. He led the Real Clear Politics average the entire time. Not the case versus Hillary. So at minimum, you have to say what Trump has been doing to this point is not working. Now there are examples where people pick up steam. In the fall, Gerald Ford did, Mitt Romney did, Al Gore did, but something changed. Something changed in the dynamic of the race for that to occur. Maybe Donald Trump does a Mitt Romney Etch-a-Sketch and runs a completely different character beginning from the first debate. If that happened, maybe those numbers would change. I am not expecting that. And even if he did try it, it's possible that his perception on the American electorate has been so seared in that it's too late to do a real change.
There have been some reacting to news of former and current Republicans saying not only will they not be voting for Donald Trump in November, some saying that they will be voting for Hillary Clinton in November. The reaction has sort of been along two camps. There are those who email me and say that's because of the unique disaster that is Donald Trump. There are others who say that's because Hillary Clinton is such a moderate Democrat that politically it makes sense that she would appeal to many Republicans, many more Republicans than the normal average Democrat would sort of appeal to. I'd love to get your thoughts on that, number one. But number two, my analysis has been, effectively speaking, for the Republican Party's future, it doesn't matter that when you have this number of public Republicans saying they're voting for the Democrat, whatever the reason is, because it's anti-Trump or because Hillary's appealing, it's got to be bad for the Republican Party's future, no?
Well, yes, and to your initial premise, those two things, is it Trump's failings or Clinton's moderation? I mean, those things are mutually exclusive. I think both factors are at play here. The bigger question for the Republicans going forward is, assuming Trump loses, which all signs point to, and potentially by a lot, is it because of Trump the person or the Trump platform? There was the RNC autopsy after Mitt Romney lost. Mitt Romney ran on self-deportation of immigrants and was caught talking about the 47% freeloading off of the American government. That stuff clearly did not play well, and so there's this formal Republican National Committee autopsy said we have to reach out to minority voters in a more robust way. We have to figure out how to do comprehensive immigration reform. We can't get caught up about voting laws that encourage early voting. We need to get into the early voting game and try to win those voters to our side. The Donald Trump nomination runs in the exact opposite direction of all of that. So you could then conclude, okay, it's been 3 times now, Obama twice and now Hillary. The problem is not them. The problem is us. We need to really do something dramatically different with non-white voters if we're going to function as a major party in modern America. Or, and so that's kind of like a Jeb Bush, Lindsey Graham, Marco Rubio type of interpretation. The other interpretation, which is more favorable to Ted Cruz, is, hey, we can still be anti-immigrant, but you can't insult Gold Star mothers while being anti-immigrant. So let's not abandon our anti-immigrant position. We can still win as a predominantly all-white party if we just need to have the right candidate for it. I think that's the debate that Republicans are going to have come November 9th.
CNN has done a couple of libertarian town halls. I believe they're going to be doing a Green Party town hall. We now have this independent Republican Mormon who is running an independent campaign, like I said. To what extent are there, let me phrase it a different way. Are there any states in which, in the big picture, any of these third-party candidacies could impact election results?
Not as it stands. There is, you look at the last couple of times where third-party candidates played a role. And I'm sorry to get your YouTube comments in a lather, but Ralph Nader did contribute to tipping the election to George W. Bush. Yes, the Supreme Court had played a major role in that also, but he had enough votes to tip New Hampshire to Bush and tip Florida to the Supreme Court. And some people look at 1992, Ross Perot. It's a myth that he tipped the whole election to Clinton. There is evidence that he tipped Georgia, Ohio, and I want to say New Hampshire. Forgive me if I'm getting the third one wrong. But they tipped those to Clinton, but those three in and of itself were not the Electoral College margin. So you can't say that Perot played that much of a role. In the national exit polls, Perot drew evenly from Clinton and Bush when people asked, what's your second choice? In those races, in the Ross Perot race, Perot had a big number. He was seen as a plausible candidate by some. In 2000, Nader had a very small number. Just the race was so tight that he was able to make a difference. Typically speaking, the bigger the lead, and in Clinton's case, Clinton was seen as well ahead of Bush in 92. The bigger the lead, the less of a fear that people inclined to vote third party have to casting that vote. They don't feel that they're going to be a spoiler, so they can safely cast the protest vote. So you may see this year, if Clinton is well ahead of Trump, people might say, I feel comfortable voting for Jill Stein, especially if I'm in a deep blue or deep red state. I feel comfortable voting for Gary Johnson. Trump's a sure loser anyway, and I don't want that guy to win. So I don't mind voting for Gary Johnson. So those numbers may come up because of those factors. The counter prevailing force against that happening is they don't have a lot of money, either one of them. And they're probably not going to get into the debates. Neither one is getting close to 15% right now. And Gary Johnson's kind of close, but I mean, he's more like 8, 9, 10. That's a pretty big jump to make between now and mid-September if he's going to do that. So probably they're not going to get the face time. Probably they're not going to have the money. The one underlying question is it such a blowout that people say, I don't need to have an ad about Jill Stein or Gary Johnson to make me do that vote. I'm just going to do it anyway.
Last thing I want to touch on, and it sort of is related to what you're saying here. I am having a little bit of concern that if the polls do stay significantly, moderately in favor of Hillary Clinton, that there may be Clinton voters or would-be Clinton voters who would say, she doesn't need my vote. I'm going to stay home because she appears to be so far ahead. Is that a reasonable concern?
I wouldn't say it's a huge concern. There was some of that in 96 where the polls for Clinton and Dole were pretty big, and I think the margin ended up being a little smaller because there was that level of complacency. The big risk here for Democrats is if you have this big margin against Trump, and if you get then a sizable vote for Jill Stein because of that, it's not going to tip the election to Trump, but it could fortify the Green Party's position in American politics. If they break 5% nationally, they get a lot of money from the federal government for 2020. Their estimation is about $10 million. It depends exactly how much the vote is. That determines how much they would get. It would also probably help them on a state-by-state basis to become ballot qualified and not have to do a petition procedure to get on the ballot next time around in several states. So if you want the Green Party to have that kind of foothold, then it makes sense to vote Green Party and not worry whether it's going to be a spoiler for Trump. If you don't want that to happen, if you think it's sort of a casual symbolic vote, you might want to ask yourself, wait a second, do I want to have the Greens in the Democrats' face for the next 4 to 8 years? That might make things a bit touchy going forward. So people should treat that vote as a serious vote and think about what do you really want to have happen after November 8th.
All right, Bill Scher, Campaign for America's Future, Politico. He's watching it. We're watching it. Thanks as always, Bill.
My pleasure.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let me catch you up on the Roger Ailes sexual harassment scandal so that I can tell you the latest amazing news. Last month, former Fox News anchor Gretchen Carlson filed a lawsuit against Roger Ailes for sexual harassment. And right after that, a whole list of former colleagues came out with similar stories. Weeks later, Roger Ailes resigned. Huge golden parachute, $40 million reportedly. There's currently an internal investigation being conducted by a law firm. It originally was focused just on Roger Ailes, but after these allegations continued surfacing from at least 20 women at this point, we have news about that investigation. News number one is the investigation now is also including other Fox News executives, and I don't think any of us would be surprised if it turns out that this sort of sexual harassment boys club scenario extended beyond just Roger Ailes. Wouldn't surprise me. I doubt it would surprise much of our audience. The big news is that there are now discussions of the audio tapes that allegedly exist that multiple women have reportedly recorded in conversation with Roger Ailes. We may have actual audio evidence of many of what I can only assume are cringeworthily embarrassing exchanges. And the settlement discussions that are now happening, reportedly based on individuals familiar with these negotiations, are growing in terms of the size of the potential settlements, by some reports up to 8 figures, because of the reported existence of these audio tapes. Can you imagine, Lewis, if audio tapes were released of Roger Ailes sexually harassing and making suggestions about the exchanges potentially of sexual favors for positions or raises on Fox News?
I can't wait for this stuff to come out. And it's if you were in that workplace and you know this type of thing is happening, why wouldn't you carry something around with you that you might use to catch this guy in the act? And now we know what that golden parachute was for. It was to help him with all the settlements.
Well, interesting. You're sort of joking, but that's actually true. I mean, the negotiations include the idea that Ailes would personally help to fund part of this settlement because, the sort of big picture of it is his behavior was so outside of anything relating to his job description or what he was supposed to be doing here. And as a result, we are now subject to these lawsuits that Fox News wants him to personally be funding whatever settlements are ultimately reached. Journalist Gabriel Sherman recently alleged, and it hasn't been refuted, that Fox News already settled for $3.15 million with Lori Loon, who is a former booker on Fox News. This is just truly, truly incredible. And by the way, added to the list of names, we recently heard that Megyn Kelly also jumped in and said, oh, yeah, this is what Roger Ailes did. Andrea Tantaros, who is another Fox News host that has not been on the air since April, is saying she also was a victim of Roger Ailes' harassment. The guy still has defenders on the internet, and that's the most amazing thing. We saw it with Bill Cosby. We are seeing it with Roger Ailes. And I'm wondering, what's the big picture? There are going to be some really big settlements here. There's no doubt about that. Could this influence how these boys' clubs treat women bigger picture? Because you know that in most cases, this goes on at many companies. This goes on in many, many places. You rarely hear about it. There's a sort of power dynamic where, as we've talked about on the show and spoke about with Rachel, it's very reasonable to think that victims of this type of thing, women who are victims, will just never come out because they need the job and they're supporting their family or whatever. Maybe this could serve to change the dynamic at some other organizations where this goes on. I don't know. I'm sort of trying to find a silver lining that goes above and beyond Gretchen Carlson coming away with $15 million.
Yeah, this happens at the smallest of companies and the biggest of companies.
Yeah.
And what this will do is maybe make a few people either think differently about this type of behavior,
right?
Not act on their impulses, or just make them get better at covering up whatever they do.
Yeah, I think the initial instinct would be, how can we better cover up and make sure we can continue doing this without getting in trouble? That's probably the most likely outcome of this. Right-wingers are flying off the handle because military dad Khizr Khan, the father of deceased army captain Humayun Khan, said on an Arabic language channel that Allah, God, is causing Donald Trump to make mistakes. Dunya News reported that the father of U.S. soldier Humayun Khan said that Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump is unacceptable to the U.S. and that Allah makes people like Trump make mistakes to discredit them in the public eyes forever. Right-wingers are going nuts, saying, look at this extremist talking about Allah, saying Allah wants Trump to lose. I hate to break it to you, but this is no different than George W. Bush saying God told him to invade Iraq. This is no different than Ted Cruz or Ted Cruz's wife or Ben Carson saying God told them to run for president. If you believe that people claiming their God said things about politics is ridiculous, then it's ridiculous no matter what name you use for God. And that's what's amazing to me, Lewis. The same right-wingers who seem to take no issue with Ted Cruz saying God told me to run for president are saying it's wrong that Khizr Khan thinks God wants to expose Donald Trump as a charlatan. If you believe one is ridiculous, you have to believe the other is ridiculous. The fact that their word for God is Allah doesn't change that reality.
Yeah. And if you think that one is legitimate, in this case, maybe you're not thinking the other one is legitimate, because if you're a Christian, you're thinking Islam isn't real. I suppose if you're a devout Muslim, you're thinking Christianity isn't real. So there's that.
People are criticizing Khizr Khan because he allegedly stands to make money from Muslim immigration to the U.S. through a law firm that he's associated with. It's an allegation, right? Whether it's true or not, it changes absolutely nothing about the hypocrisy of saying he's an extremist because he believes his God is playing a role in American politics, but none of the Republicans who believe that God is playing a role in American politics are extremists. You can't justify the two. There is absolutely no justification for believing that one is crazy and the other makes perfect sense. And this is an unfair criticism of Mr. Khan, no matter what else is true about a law firm that he may or may not be associated with. We have a voicemail number, and that number is 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail I received.
Hi, David. I want you to know that not all of your listeners are young or even middle-aged. I'm almost 81, and I love your show. Thanks.
Very nice voicemail, Lewis. You know, it's usually 2 to 3 weeks of just horrible, horrible things being said about me or my family or me personally, or just crazy unhinged comments. It's nice to hear from a nice, nearly 81-year-old woman who's a fan of the show every once in a while.
Of course. Yeah. And apparently you haven't angered her to the point where she's turned to patriotism.
No, not yet. Although maybe her next appearance on the show will be on Hatriot Mail rather than the voicemail segment if her tone changes. Although this seems like a genuinely nice woman. I don't
sounds very nice.
Yeah. Let's talk about today's bonus show. We will talk about the discarded food problem. We've talked about this before. Lewis has told us stories from his time working in a produce department at a grocery store about how bad the discarded food problem is in the U.S. We have now learned it is even worse than we thought. Additionally, the Department of Justice confirms that Baltimore police are not necessarily the best people, and we're going to go into those details based on that report. The only way to get access to the bonus show is by being a David Pakman Show member. And of course, you can sign up at davidpakman.com/membership. And there are 2 coupons left. The coupon code is BETA50, BETA50. And if you enter that code, it'll only work 2 more times. You will get a 50% discount off of your membership for life. And that is, it's a wonderful thing, Lewis. On Monday, we announced the new David Pakman Show website. I announced that we had a coupon code that could be used 25 times. It has been used 23 times and only 2 remain. My prediction, Lewis, is this is the last we will ever hear of that coupon code, because I believe by tomorrow morning, by this time tomorrow afternoon, in fact, because I want clarity, there will be no more coupons to be known of.
It's perfectly possible that by the time people even hear this, those 2 coupons will have been used, but hopefully not.
Okay, well, Lewis painting a sort of sadder picture of the coupon code. But yeah, that is also possible. Check it out, davidpakman.com/membership. I think the bonus show is better than ever at this point.
It's, I'm better than the regular show for sure.
Oh, well, that's probably a different conversation to have a different day. We will talk to you on the bonus show. Follow me on Twitter at @dpakman. We are on Facebook, facebook.com/davidpakmanshow.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.